But now I'd like to pick up on the point made by Bernard Nash in that email that I was quoting earlier, his reminder of Adam Smith's advice on the regulation of business. Here is, well, a rather similar argument.
Trustworthy beings emerge only in certain circumstances, and that trust can be as easily eroded by a free economy as sustained by it. No market economy can function properly without the support of legal and moral sanctions designed to hold individual agents to their bargains and to return the cost of misbehaviour to the one who causes it. But modern economies have developed ways of avoiding costs or passing them on that effectively remove the sanctions from dishonest or manipulative behaviour.
But that particular insistence on the importance of legal and moral sanctions comes not from way back from Adam Smith, but from a new book with the intriguing and provocative title How to Be a Conservative. And its author is Roger Scruton, who's currently visiting professor of philosophy at the University of Oxford. He now joins me in the studio. Roger, trust can be as easily eroded by a free economy as sustained by it, your words, and ones that some people might just think don't quite chime with modern conservatism. Is that because, as you suggest, the word conservative no longer means what it once did?
I think it does mean what it always meant. It's just that, of course, because it is also the label for a political movement, it gets borrowed and put to other uses. But I think people who, like me, would call themselves conservatives because of their convictions would, on the whole, recognise that it was always meant the same. It's meant essentially the instinct for maintaining the equilibrium of a given social order and those institutions that make that order durable.
I mean, that very much plays into your argument that true conservatism starts from the sentiment that good things are easily destroyed, but not easily created. Expand on that for me.
Well, I think that it's a very simple truth, but often simple truths are the hardest to, as it were, reveal, to make people understand. We live at after a long period of civilization in which we have enormous benefits. We take them for granted, like the rule of law, the fact that we can walk around peacefully without being threatened, for the most part at least, and the fact that we can supply ourselves with what we need and our children with what they need and all the rest. These things are good things. And we tend to forget that it involved many generations of sacrifice to produce them. So, but you can destroy them overnight, and the lesson of the 20th century is that it is very easy to do.
And you want to say that the reason perhaps this particular conservative philosophy that you're beginning to describe to me now somehow lacks salience with a number of people is because it doesn't sound very exciting.
Exactly,
compared to the idea of we're going to do something new.
Yeah, exactly. That's what my point in writing this book was, to remind people that there's a philosophy can be true but boring, and its opponents can be exciting because false.
Let's go back a little bit historically, because you trace the roots of conservatism, intellectual conservatism, back to the Reformation, the Enlightenment. Particularly, you concentrate on the development of the notion of the social contract. And tell me about the social contract, its significance, and what counts as the social contract.
Well, obviously the social contract philosophers were responding to, first of all, to the Reformation, and then to the Enlightenment and to the growth of scientific knowledge, the sense that people, the growing sense that people had in the 17th and 18th century that legitimate government depends upon us. It's the people who confer legitimacy on the people who govern them. And therefore, the easiest way to do this is by making a contract with your fellow citizens. But the conservatives among them were wary of this always, that they recognise, of course, that people must live by agreement and consent. That is the ideal. But it's not possible to get people together to consent to something if they don't already believe that they belong together. You know, they must have a sense of a first-person plural, and a we, which is theirs. And that, I think, is one of the messages of my book, is that we have tended to lose sight of this. Because we're so keen on this contractual vision of society, we don't recognise that actually contracts depend upon a deeper form of attachment.
And this really rather relates, doesn't it? I mean, if we move on, we were talking about Adam Smith before, 18th century, going back to, I mean, it is interesting, isn't it, the ways in which Adam Smith's emphasis upon the importance of those types of things that you're talking about, the existing contract between people, has almost been omitted, and he is somehow regarded by many as an advocate of totally, if you like, amoral free enterprise.
Yes, that's because Adam Smith was as we all know, he was the first person really to articulate the view that that the benefits of social order might be the result of people's intentions without them actually intending them, but because the baker and the butcher who supply my dinner were doing it for their own self-interest, but nevertheless it's in my interest too. In something like that way, institutions, laws, peaceful coexistence can be the byproduct of people doing things for quite different reasons. And I think he was right about that, and it's a profound point because it does show that a free economy in the end is necessary, but of course it depends upon other things that are not explicitly stated, namely that I don't cheat on that butcher, I pay my bills when I promise to do so, and so on. And that is the moral heart of society, which is the hardest thing to reproduce.
And that you don't pass on debts to future generations as well.
Exactly, that in particular. And of course Edmund Burke made this famous point against the advocates of the social contract, that of course there should be a contract, but we should include in it not only the living but also the dead and the unborn. They're all part of that. They too depend upon our behaviour.
All through this you can hear your objections to the planners, to the people who have a scheme, an idea of how society can be reformed. I mean, quite clearly in the case of, like Stalinist Soviet Union, one can see here this would be a plan that everyone might object to, but it's a more general objection to the idea of plans.
Yes, I think that this is one of the really interesting points that have, I think, come to the surface in modern discussions, is the point of the extent to which a plan can destroy knowledge just as much as it depends on knowledge. You can have a plan. You can step into your neighbour's family when you hear them quarrelling. You say, "This is ridiculous. You've got to stop. Here's the plan. Here's how you should live." And of course, for a day there might be peace, but then the ensuing row is even worse than the one from which you started, because there are facts about human life which we can't put into a plan. They're too complicated, and each plan that a person has is subject to amendment from plans that other people have, and how to amalgamate them is an insoluble question.
As you're talking, I just suddenly remembered, I think, something that Popper talked about, the way we should proceed was by bit and piece social engineering.
Well, that's right. That's exactly the origins of this sort of argument are in the Vienna of Popper's youth. People like Hayek and so on reacting against the whole socialist idea that everything that has gone wrong went wrong because there was no plan.
Yes, I mean, we can come back to, the famous poverty of historicism, because we can talk also about the way you object not simply to the idea of a plan, but in particular to those people who have some vision of society evolving, some idea, particularly of progress. Is that all progress? I mean, do you want to take the position that really there cannot be any discernible progress in the sense of society is getting better and better?
Well, of course there is progress in lots of areas. Things get better in some areas and get worse in other areas. And we all have an idea of when one condition is better than another, and we aim at it. And we do hope that people can cooperate to produce what is better. However, we do have an awful lot of evidence from history that when they do that, they create things that are worse.
Now, what interesting about your book, because you pick up on a whole number of areas and talk about the various truths which can be found in these quite different areas, these truths which underlie conservatism. Let's just talk, we haven't got time to talk about all of these, but one of which you refer to is nationalism and the importance of the nation state.
Yeah.
Now, some Europeans or globalists will wonder how we should be glorifying in the nation state when it seems to be the cause of so many wars or so many conflicts. So what is it so significant and important about the nation state and honouring the nation state?
This is a question which I think is very difficult to untie all the strands in it. But nationalism is a kind of ideology. The nation-state is a fact, an institution. The European Union began from people who said that the cause of the last war was nationalism. The cause of the last war was not nationalism, it was German nationalism. That was the problem, and the result, the thing which solved the problem was British patriotism, our sense that we had to defend our nation against this thing. Without the nation-state, that war could not have been brought to an end. So we have to separate this bad, excited thing, this ideology of nationalism, from this absolutely necessary thing, which is our sense of belonging to a pre-existing national identity, which demands our loyalty, through which we can stand up to aggression and defend our inheritance. And I think that is what I mean by a first-person plural. I think we all have need of it, and the nation-state is the best form available to us now because it defines our loyalty without religion, independently of religion, independently of our way of private life, independently of family attachments. It just says, this country and the law that has prevailed here, that's the thing to which you owe allegiance.
But this is not a statement that everybody should fall in line, like the cricket test.
No, absolutely. It's the nation's national loyalty is compatible with individual freedom and secular law. And we know now from the confrontation that we're having with the Islamists that there are people who want a different kind of first-person plural, one which involves religious conformity, the imposition of a law which is not made by us for our own purposes, but imposed from on high. All this is quite dangerous in the modern world. Therefore, I think we should wake up to the fact that without the nation-state, we haven't got the first-person plural that we need.
There are a couple of places in your text where I found some almost dissonance, because you talk about the contract, about a sense of we-ness, about a sense of being involved in the nation-state, and yet you seem to be concerned or have objections to the idea of gay marriage, which to many people would seem an example of people trying to insert themselves into normal society, state society, regulated society.
I don't think I'm not very outspoken on this issue in that book.
Just an example.
I would say that there's a difference, but of course all institutions have to adapt. Marriage has to adapt to what people are and what people want. Inevitably, I agree with that. But the question is, what I object to is when this adaptation is led from above by people who have a plan, who think that they can improve things. We have to admit that it wasn't led from below by people's demand. On the contrary, there were some people who demanded it, but on the whole, it was an imposition, a political imposition. Irrespective of also all the feelings that someone like me, who is an old-fashioned, heterosexual of an antiquated dinosaur kind, the objections that we might have to remaking the institution, an institution on which social reproduction depends. I put all those to one side. That's my way of life. It's not for the government to decide.
I've heard gay people objecting to the whole idea that gays should marry, because this is becoming far too institutionalised.
I agree. I have plenty of gay friends who feel exactly the same, but it's hard to say it now.
I've just got time to ask you about it. I mean, you're not by any means dismissive of all the elements of the socialist tradition, are you? Indeed, you look within socialism for some truths as well. What is the truth of socialism?
Well, the truth that we are mutually dependent. That I live a life which depends upon how strangers are behaving towards me, on the effects of what strangers are doing. I'm committed in many ways to everybody who shares my citizenship, and that means that his condition is my concern as well. And that is really the message of socialism of the 20th century.
But would you want to say in the same way that you hardly feel that probably the present Conservative Party contains the conservatism that you're writing about?
Politics is a choice of evils, and I would say that it is the lesser of the available evils by a small margin.
Roger Scruton, thank you very much.